back to Pop Culture Yearbook. We're going again. This is a show where we pick pieces of pop culture that were important to us in a given year, and we discuss our memories and dig into those movies, album shows, and more. I'm Brad.
I am Pete.
And I'm Giff.
All right, and we're gonna sit around the water cooler tonight, guys. We're gonna talk about some TV and a show that was really important to me and really important to Giff for a while.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we'll see what he has to say about it when it's all said and done. Anything you want to follow up on previous? Pete, you came back last week. Do you feel like you nailed it? Do you have any regrets?
I think
how we doing back on the show?
What like back? You're asking about the show itself? Or are you asking about
how do you feel about being back on the show? Are you happy?
Oh, I'm excited. Yes, I'm very, very excited. I can hardly contain myself with excitement.
Well, that's good.
I'm still so on it, but I'm kidding. Totally kidding, Pete.
As of the last episode, I did mention that I had an interview with my new job, and tomorrow is the big day. I'm going to find out whether or not I got it. So be cheering for me, people.
Yes, we'll be pulling.
I am, and hopefully, because if you didn't, you might leave us again, and so that would be sad.
No, that'd be bad.
We'll see. I don't think that'll happen again. We'll see. I don't think so. My status is week to week.
There you go.
We are in the year of 2006 now. 18 years ago, we picked a lot of good stuff last week, especially, TV. There was a lot of good TV going on. The music, is a little bit harder for some people in this one, but we got through that too. But this was a time when the TV was still in that kind of like, DVRs are out. So I got a DVR now, or you had a TiVo, but there wasn't really streaming yet. It was still, if there was, it was its very, very infancy. I don't think there really was. So you still had, a lot of big network shows, and you had what we're going to do a draft on later, appointment TV shows that you just couldn't miss when they were on, or that you then wanted to not miss because you wanted to talk about them the next day or as soon as possible with other people that watched them. And tonight's pick is one of the best examples of that of all time, I think, and that is Lost. And I'll just tell you why I picked it here first. So this is a show that when it came out, I heard a lot about it. And I actually saw it on TV once, and I'm like, change the channel. Like, I'm not going to get into that. It's not really something that sounds interesting to me. But then my wife wanted to watch it. And so we didn't start watching it till after the first season was done. And this was at a time where we borrowed, the way we watched it, some friend of hers or somebody she knew had recorded the whole season on their own DVDs. Like not, you go to the store and buy it.
Videotapes, like they recorded it on DVD.
Recorded DVDs, which I was doing at that time too. I was making certain things. And so we flew. So we watched the pilot, and like, okay, this is freaking great, and everybody loved it. And so we flew through that first season, and then it was hard because the second season had started. And so it was hard to find them, but there was somebody who was recording them for us. And so we were able to borrow them up to the point where probably like the 6th episode or so, we were then caught up. And from then on, we could record it, and we watched it every week. And then I found out Gifford was watching it, and then we talked about it all the time. And my sister and her husband up the street were watching it, and it became something that was just this phenomenon. And it was this huge show. And 2006 was when the 3rd season started. So the reason why I picked it for this year is because the 3rd season I felt was kind of a tipping point. I think it was a tipping point for Gifford.
Yep.
It was great TV. Like, people were all in on this show and fascinated with it. And we're going to watch the season, or we're going to talk about the season finale of which actually aired in 2007. But whatever, we smudged those lines because 2006 was when it all started.
The auditors are going to come after us.
No, I remember when the 2-hour finale of season 3 ended, my jaw was dropped, and I was like, and I remember my quote, like, that was the most entertaining 2 hours of television I've ever watched in my life. And so I remembered that ever since. And I'm like, if we ever get to this show on this podcast, we got to watch that again, and we'll see if I still feel that way. So we're going to talk about the episode Through the Looking Glass, which was the last episode, 2-part episode of season 3. And that's why I picked it. And now I turn it over. I'm going to go to Gifford first because he was watching it too. So Gifford, what do you remember about the show? Why did you love it? And what was your initial journey?
I started watching this from what I remember, and of course my memory is awful, but I remember watching this from the get-go. I believe, was it on Fox?
No, it was on ABC.
It was on ABC.
Yeah,
Okay.
ABC, I know that.
I just remember seeing like the previews for it and thinking, okay, well that looks kind of interesting. And I mean,
I think it had a lot of buzz, right?
Right. And that first episode, man, I mean, it just grabbed you and brought you in, and I was completely enamored with it. And this was the first time that I remember a show that used flashbacks to give backstory. So you start in the middle of this thing.
It was such a hook.
Right. You start in the middle of this thing with people you have no idea who they are, and then, each episode kind of focuses on, one of the main characters. So you kind of get
one at a time, right? Early on.
Yeah. So you got to know a little bit about, Jack as a doctor. You got to know like Kate, but not a lot. Like they just kind of throw these little tidbits in there, and then they come back to it, later on. And I mean, it was just absolutely nuts. I was glued to the television. I don't think I had a DVR. Maybe I don't think I had a DVR, a TiVo when it started, but I had one later on. So I think I was taping the show and watching it.
Awesome.
And I mean, the cast was excellent. And gorgeous views on the for the scenery in Hawaii there. And just very interesting. It was, a total mystery as to not only what is going on, but who these people are and how they revealed it. Just really drew you in. And I just remember like the season finales, I was just so bummed that I would have to wait the entire summer until the fall season would come out again.
And that's why this one was such a big deal to me too, because the first two seasons, they had great finale. I don't remember exactly what happened, but they had great finales, of course, and they would set up the next thing. And so when this one rolled around, you're like, I am ready for my mind to be blown. And it was, because that's exactly what this one did. You talk about the flashbacks, and we'll get to that. But it's like, what are they going to do, and what's it going to set up? And this one just blew your mind like 5 times. It was awesome.
Yeah. Well,
Pete. Oh, sorry, Jeff.
You go ahead, Pete.
You mentioned
you didn't watch the whole
flashbacks.
series. What?
Well, I will say you talk a lot about flashbacks. There's also flash forwards, which happened in these episodes that we just watched a little bit too. I will say that I think that the experience of watching it was very immersive. And what I mean by that is because I didn't watch any of the other episodes hardly, and so I felt lost.
Hey,
which is what maybe they're going for. But so I think I do see though how it could draw you in, and I probably should go back and watch it from the beginning. Maybe I could do that as well now that I have a little free time on my hands. But it's not one that I picked up. My wife did actually watch it, and we do actually. I think we still have it. We have the DVD box set. It's either the complete series or she has watched most of it, but she said that she didn't want me. Well, I think she has gotten through season 3 for sure. How many seasons are there in total? 6. Okay. So I think that she just didn't get all the way. Huh?
Well, the last 3 are actually kind of shorter, like 17 episodes, 18 episodes.
A little shorter than your normal, like 22, 24.
Right.
But it's 6 full seasons, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She was into it, but I don't think she has actually made it all the way through the last season. So probably through like season 5 or something. She spoke volumes about it, like how good it is, just like you guys did. I just haven't taken the time to sit down and watch it, other than a couple of episodes here and there while she had it on, and then these that we watched. But there were a few characters and things like that did stand out to me, which we'll get into.
As I said, so you were familiar with like some of the characters, and that you just.
Yeah.
But speaking of being lost, I mean, that's the way it was watching the show. You even if you followed it you were lost. You had no idea where it was going. And some people, like Gifford, probably thought at some point that, okay, they're just making it up as they go, and this is stupid now. But so I rewatched it about 5 years ago because my son wanted to watch it. And we had a great time watching it. It was awesome. And I thought, okay, I'm going to watch it again. So I'm going to really like figure this out. And I'm pretty sure I felt more confused after the second watch than I did the first.
Well,
Not
the
that I
first
didn't-
watch, you're just hanging on for dear life.
Yeah. And
Like,
not
just-
that I didn't enjoy it. I'm glad I watched it again. And I would even probably watch it again if I had the time. But I did not get any answers. And it did not clear anything up that I had questions about before. So that was the disappointment in it, but I still enjoyed it.
Well, and this was one of those shows that, again, I watched right away and talked about to my wife a lot, and she finally got into it. And then this was the last episode that I watched. I
Ever watched any more ever?
No, and
Oh
I was just done after this episode. But my wife continued to watch, and we were talking about it, and she goes, I don't know if I watched the whole thing to the end, but she did make sure she watched the last few episodes, or maybe caught the last season.
I would think that.
But yeah, I am famous for, getting into a show, and then when I feel like it's jumped the shark, and I feel like they've made such massive, to me, it was like this show was a massive hit, huge. I felt like the network just wanted them to keep going because it was making money. And I don't think the writers felt like they knew what the hell was going on. So a lot of times the thing that kind of started to turn me off to the show was they would raise maybe like 5 questions and answer 1. And they just wouldn't resolve some of these major things and maybe it's because I'm not smart enough to figure out what was going on.
I feel like, Brad, without giving away any at the ending for people that haven't watched it, but do you feel like that it was well resolved? All those plot points got resolved at the very end of the series?
No, it's much left up to interpretation.
Okay.
That's what I'm saying about not thinking I was going to get more answers the second time. I didn't feel
I
that.
see what you mean. Okay.
I mean, I'm sure somebody would say it was, and they would have their theories, but I don't go that deep with these things. It's fine. And I totally can understand why you would quit watching it, like Gifford. Like we spar on some things, but and obviously we both love the show, and I get it that he quit. I don't remember you quitting after this episode. I would have thought it was in season 4 once they started doing more of because you always talked about time travel.
Yep.
And this episode, and this didn't have that. This was still kind of the continuation of all the good stuff. So I feel like you're overselling that. I felt like you watched season 4 at least for a while, and then you gave up. But maybe you're right.
I started watching episode 1 of season 4, and again, my memory is awful, but I don't remember that episode. Like I don't remember Hurley, in a car chase with police and Charlie coming back to talk to him, and
everything definitely changed because then you had a whole new set of circumstances and a whole new plot line going on there. So and so you could like it or you didn't like. I mean, that's and the ratings were still high all the way through, but they definitely dropped off after the 3rd season. They went down.
Well, and I will say this, like when I was watching that first episode of season 4, at the end of like the beginning of the episode, before the first commercial break, when Hurley yells out, I'm famous, I'm one of the
Oceanic 6.
And you're like, 6? What happened? So that honestly, I was like, ooh, that's good. That's a hell of a hook to pull you in for the next season. But yeah, to me, they made it off the island. They make it off the island because if I remember correctly, this is the first time they ever had a flash forward.
Well, yeah, I wanted to get to that because that was the big reveal, and it wasn't until the end of the episode that you even knew it. So we'll get to that.
So, like, to me, they made it off.
That was the mind-blowing thing.
And it's like, okay, well, they're showing that they make it off just to give the viewer hope so that they can keep watching. You know what I mean? So to me, it's like, well, they made it off. That's the whole point of
what the hell
was it for the better? Because it didn't seem like he was doing well.
At that point, I was like, I'm kind of over it at this point, So,
I mean,
but anyway,
was it for the better, at least for Jack, right? Because he was the main character there in the flash forward, and it did things were not well for him.
It seemed like it was. So, you want to take us on to our next point?
You mentioned Hawaii, so I just wanted to say that it did have a lot of buzz coming in. It wasn't like some sleeper hit. The pilot of this show cost $14 million, which is one of the most expensive shows ever made. And it's due in part to Hawaii and the location, but also the cast is just enormous. Like there's so many people. And you didn't really know any of them. They all became like well known through the show, but there weren't very many of them that were like when Friends came out, Courtney Cox, a lot of us knew her through Ace Ventura and some sitcoms before that.
Yeah, but you knew Jack from Party of Five, and you knew. Well, I didn't either.
I'm not saying that they were unknowns, but they weren't like there wasn't like an established star. I don't think like.
Okay. Well, because Charlie was a hobbit in the Lord of the Rings movies, so I mean that Okay. So, but I understand your point. Yeah.
By the way, I have been to the region where this was filmed. When you go to Hawaii, they have a spot in a region where a lot of these shows are filmed. I think Hawaii 5-0 was filmed mostly in Honolulu, but when they go into the palm tree areas, beaches and stuff like that, Jurassic Park also filmed in the same region, and they have like on display all of the films, and those are just a couple that I could think of. The ones that have been filmed there. Very beautiful area.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then I mentioned the ratings, and so the show was consistently between at least 11 million and 18 million viewers per episode, and from what season 3 was kind of the peak of that, the highest for like consistency. But then it did like the 11 million is more towards the last 3 seasons where it kind of dipped because people, like Gifford, some people got really frustrated and quit watching. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to go through the whole cast because there's so many, but if you've seen the show, then you know a lot of the cast, but just a short version, you've got this plane crash right away and a bunch of people end up surviving on this island. And you've got Jack, who's like your hero. And this Matthew Fox, he's like the main guy pretty much, but you've got Kate and Sawyer who are, and Sawyer's like the bad guy. And so Jack and Sawyer kind of butt heads. You got Hurley, who's like your comic relief and the out of nowhere guy. And you just keep meeting more and more people. John Locke is one of the big ones early on because he's like he all of a sudden feels this kinship with the island right away. And his backstory is pretty amazing when you learn about it. And some of these characters come and go, and then they add more. And then eventually, I think it's in the first season already, you have the others, and you learn, oh, wait a minute, there's other people living on this island. And there's these constant reveals where you learn more and more things. At some point, I had forgotten about this until I was reading this. There's people from the tail of the plane that they find later, too. We learn that people that crashed it at first are just part of the survivors. There's a whole other section of the plane that crashed in another area with survivors, and eventually they come in. So it's crazy, and the way they continue to add that, and the whole first season just keeps building. And like Gifford said, they use this great technique of the flashbacks where, you like the characters on the island, but of course you don't know them, and you don't know anything about how they might be connected. And through the flashbacks, you learn every episode about certain people, and the stories they tell they're really good stories, obviously. Mm-hmm. And so that's what draws you in. And there's always characters and there's always questions. And so you're constantly wanting to keep watching. Like there's always a hook there, like a reason to watch the next episode, especially in those first few years. So that's a little back. You want to say anything else about some background, Gifford? You got any other stats or anything else?
Well, I just wanted to say, so I knew we were coming up to 06 and I knew you were going to pick this. So I started rewatching it and I got through about the first, I think 6 or 7 episodes of season 1. And then prior to tonight, I went through Wikipedia and read the plot of every other episode leading up to the finale of season 3. Because again, I mean, they're like 2 paragraph, per episode thing, yeah. But I, again, like I say, my memory's awful. So I wanted to try to get caught up on what was going on. So like you said, I forgot about the tailplane people.
Totally forgot about
on the other side of the island. I forgot about, that the others aren't necessarily part of the Dharma initiative, that they are actually here before a lot of them. And, Ben killed off a bunch of them. And like, just trying to remember like how everybody like intermixed and interacted with each other, like how Locke went along on his journey and what happened with between Kate and Sawyer and Kate and Jack and Charlie. You know, just try to get caught up before we watched this episode again. So, you know, trying to just remember the show to that point. So it was a lot of fun, just even reading this stuff, because good Lord, to watch all these episodes. Yeah, to try to watch them all, to get caught up.
Well, that is the commitment that you bring to the show every week. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
So what I did, because you know this is a 2-part episode, so it's longer than the others, and there's always so much going on. And I looked at it like there was like 4 different storylines happening at once. So I'm going to read we do our synopsis, but I'm going to read it one kind of storyline at a time. And of course they overlap at parts, but I did my best to like separate out the key things happening in the different parts of the island. And after each part, we're going to stop and we'll talk about that, and we can talk about characters and things that we liked throughout the show. Are you ready?
Ready.
Go for it.
Okay. So Lost Season 3 finale, Through the Looking Glass, has multiple storylines going on, like all Lost episodes. At this point of the series, there are 2 factions on the island. We're going to start with our heroes, who are the plane crashers, who, you know, maybe they're not all heroic, they're not all perfect, but we still are pretty much rooting for them. So they are the crash survivors, and they have seemingly finally found a way to make contact off of the island to try to be rescued. So that's the big thing here, is like there's this opportunity to be rescued, and you know, and some people are for it, and some people are, you know, for whatever reason not necessarily want it, but of course most of them want to get off if they can. Jack, our main character, is who, of course, he's a doctor.
Yep.
Jack is the leading the majority of the survivors to the top of the mountain on the island, where they would have access to make this call. On their trek, they cross paths with Ben. So you brought up Ben. Ben is the smarmy leader of the others. He is one of the most unappealing, villainous creatures on a TV show ever, but yet you don't see that at first, because he's like this nerd. Like he just looks like this weak little nerd.
I love him as a villain. Maybe
yeah.
I won't.
He's a great villain. But what I love here is that it gets to a point where Jack just beats the crap out of him, and you just feel it. You just feel it and love it, because you know you're on Jack, and this guy he's bad news. But he thinks that Ben has ordered the murder of 3 of the other survivors who are back at their camp, which we'll get to in a minute. So Jack beats him up. Ben can't fight back. He physically doesn't have that. Ben is now in custody, but he repeatedly warns Jack that they are not supposed to leave this island. Finally, John Locke, who's been like in a pit of skeletons, and that's one of those questions where if you haven't watched the show for a while, like I forget why he was there, but he looks like he's basically back from the dead. He returns to the group, and he also says, you know, we shouldn't leave. We can't leave. And he threatens to kill Jack, but Jack faces him head on, and John can't kill him because they do have a connection from all this time together. So that's where we're left there. We'll get to whether they make the call or not in a minute, but all these come together, Jack, Ben, and John in one spot, and then you've got a whole bunch of survivors around there with them.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Just one thing I want to throw out. I love the opening of the show. It's kind of like Stranger Things, where it's just that it's a little shorter than Stranger Things, but the word lost moving onto the screen and twisting and the creepy music. I mean, I love that opening. It's so simple, but it's so fitting for what you're going to see. So. All right. Any comments on that part?
Well, no, you brought up Ben, and if we're talking about characters, I thought that just the way he looks, he has a very punchable face. You want to see him punch. He's got those beady little eyes and evil looking, and just you can tell he's a terrible person. I've actually seen him in some other shows. I didn't look up. I should have checked that, but I've seen him in another TV series and some other things. I'm going to look that up, what that was in, but I just wanted to
person of interest.
That probably was it. What I'm thinking of. That was
him and Jim Caviezel, I think.
Yeah.
Jesus.
But I think he was a good guy in that show. I think that he.
I never watched.
He was a nerdy guy and like the computer guy or something, but he wasn't a bad guy.
Sure,
if I recall correctly.
Gifford, you a fan of Ben?
No, I find him very despicable, and what makes him even worse was that his first alias. I can't remember the name, but he was from Minnesota.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
So I didn't like that he
He's one
drug
of
our
us.
fine state into.
And so he is, because I remember that now. When he gets like in season 1 probably or 2,
Yep.
he gets captured, right, and he's held in the hatch.
Yep.
And they don't know who he is, and he tells his story, and like you can't tell if he's good or bad. And then he's a crafty liar, and he's good at what he does, and he turns like he's evil.
Right. Yeah, and that was one thing I didn't care for with the interaction between him and Jack, was that, I mean, he talked when he left, when Ben took off from his group to go intercept the survivors. Like, he's on his own with his daughter, I guess.
He's got his daughter.
Adopted daughter. And he just tells his cohort, well, I'm going to talk him out of it. Like, he's up against, what, 40, 50 people?
He thinks he can do it.
And he thinks he can do it. And usually he can. He's a master manipulator. But the thing I didn't like was that Jack allowed him the walkie-talkie to call the beach. Like, why would you allow him to talk to you, much less get on the walkie-talkie and talk to his own guys? Because he's just going to spin whatever lie he can to make things work for him in that moment.
It's like in a horror movie. It's one of those plot devices that makes no sense, but you have to have it to advance things.
And what I liked about this in the episode as well is that Jack, he's beating the crap out of him. Probably, could have killed him, but he wants Ben to see that they're getting rescued and that he was wrong. And it's like he is so fed up with the crap that, Ben has put upon him and this group.
That's another one of those dumb things, though. Why does he need to see it? I mean, if he is of no use for anything, and he's that bad, I mean, then you should kill him. And of course, you keep him alive just because it's going to help advance the plot. So it's one of those things that you see all the time.
That was one of the things that I really became tired of on the show, was because earlier in the season, Jack was in with this group and things were going well, and he was actually hanging out with them and throwing the football and getting along with Juliet, and Ben was gonna supposedly let him go, and then John blew up the submarine. So it's like the way alliances shift with the Breeze in this show is you don't know who's coming and who's going.
And that's a good. You bring up Juliet, who is one of the characters that I like the least on this show every time. But she is one of the others, but she has defected now to this side, but you're not sure. A lot of people don't trust her still. Mm-hmm. And so she's one of those characters, is she actually trying to help him? And Jack's all bought in on her, but Sawyer's not, and other people aren't. And so you don't know. And it just adds those questions.
Right. To your point, I just want to make a point, though. Back to your, where you, Brad, said that they should just kill Ben. If he would have done that, though, he has some of the others down on the ground have some of their people in captive, right? And so if he killed them, that would mean that they would kill some of the other.
Right. He thinks they're
dead. But did he kill all of them? Did he have more people than just the 3? I thought he had more. No, he only had the 3. Oh,
that's why he got so mad and beat him up, is because he thought that he had ordered the killing.
Right. I see. I got it. Okay. I thought there was more people on the ground, and it was just those 3 that are the most of interest.
And of course, little did he know that they are alive. And of course, we get to that in a minute here.
Well, and that gets back to the whole thing. There's so many opportunities for characters to kill each other, and rightfully so, if you will, and people just don't. And we'll see later on in the episode that there is somebody who gets killed, and it's it's about effing time.
To the show's credit, they weren't afraid to kill off characters. So it's not like they never did. Major characters got killed off, or characters that were kind of major but people didn't like, they would write them out and kill them. So they did do that, and we'll get to that because that's part of why I love this episode so much.
Sure. Yeah.
The only other thing,
but you could have killed Ben about 12 times during this show. Oh, yeah. You could have killed Jack. You could have killed Locke. You could have killed, but they just never quite do. And to me, it's, again, like you say, a device within the show just to add drama. But there's
do that, so it's not like it's
But they would do it like 12 times an episode, it seemed like. So
The only other thing in this episode or in this part here that I wrote down, so it actually is when they were leaving, but because Sawyer's in another part, but Kate and Sawyer have a little fight because they've been kind of together. But she notices that he calls her Kate. And then I remembered, and I forgot what he called her, but his nickname was Freckles. And my wife just loved that he called her Freckles. And it was cute. And it was because Sawyer had a nickname for everybody. And that was like one of the parts of the show is what's Sawyer going to call this person? So, but he did not call her Freckles there, showing the change and the seriousness of the matter.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Meanwhile, the others are doing everything they can to keep these people from leaving the island. So led by Tom, who goes back to the first season where he stole Walt's kid, which we're just throwing out names now.
Walt. It was Michael's kid, Walt.
Michael's kid, Walt.
Which
again, though, at the end of the first season, that was like the mind-blowing thing at the end of that one. But so Tom is one of those guys. And they're closing in on the survivors' camp, thinking that they're going to kill or stop them because they have intel from Juliet to do this. But we find out Juliet actually is working for the good guys because only 3 have stayed there to ambush them while everybody else is left.
Right.
So things, though, don't go according to plan. You have Saeed, Jin, and Bernard left to thwart their plans. And they have these explosions set up, but only 2 go off, killing several of the others, but it leaves 3 around. And they don't have guns, and eventually they are taken into the custody of the others. Sawyer and Juliet arrive, but they don't have any way to fight because they are not armed either. And then out of nowhere, Hurley comes in driving this Volkswagen van that has been introduced earlier in the episode, in the season, that they previously found in the camp. And he runs over one of the bad guys. Another one is killed in the resulting distraction, and only Tom is left. And it's like, well, here you go, Gifford. It's like they were going to leave him alive. Nobody wanted to shoot him, but Sawyer just ruthlessly shoots him right in front of him, shocking all the others, even though they probably didn't, But it shocks them that he would do that because they're not killers. They're not like that.
Well, and like Hurley said, hey, he gave up. He surrendered. But when he shot him, like, I was like, effing right. Like,
and you knew he would,
because that's shot
if anybody's going to do that, it's Sawyer. I mean, his character is set up to be the guy that's going to cross the line and doesn't care about
badass.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So at the end of this part, the 3 good guys get away, and they're free to go try to join the others up on the top of the mountain and be saved as well. So, I love Hurley. Sometimes can be one of those characters. It's kind of like cliche, like, oh, we got to have the bigger guy who's funny, but he's really a good character, and I love the way he crashes into them. Then he gets his chance to be kind of the hero. And then my favorite quote in the whole episode is, I can't remember why. I should have written down the context more. But somebody said, "Oh, you made it," and Hurley says, "Yeah, dude, I told you, I saved them all."
Right.
And he's just so nonchalant, like, "Of course I saved them. Like it was no big deal." And he's a funny guy, but he's a good guy, and he takes a lot of crap because, of course, like Sawyer is always on him, but he doesn't give up, and that's part of what makes his story good.
Right, but so, like you say, Juliet and Sawyer are going back down to the beach because the guys, the ones that are going up the mountain, they were expecting 3 explosions on the beach, and Jin wasn't able to hit his dynamite pack, so they're like, well, something went wrong. So finally, you got Sawyer is going to go back. Juliet goes with him, lies again, says, "Oh, there's a cache of guns we can stop at and get some guns." And Hurley, he does his best. He catches up with them and says, "Hey, I'm coming with you. I want to help." And Sawyer tells him, "You're fat, you're slow, you're not going to be able to do anything." And like, I'm looking at that as Sawyer really trying to save him. Like, he doesn't want to see him get hurt, and he wants.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're extra harsh towards somebody to convince them, even if it's over the line again. And he's the one who's willing to say that, even if he maybe doesn't believe it. A lot of the other characters wouldn't say that to Hurley, even if they just wouldn't go that far.
But I love how Hurley is, like, he's the hero on the beach. Like, he's the one who made it all happen, and
yeah, dude.
And he just did his thing, man. It was awesome.
Yeah, that's a good part. I like, because there's less people, and it's just that's a good part of the episode there. And I wouldn't call it the comic relief, I mean, because it's not, but it's like, it's that kind of thing where you get a little, it's like lighter how you feel watching it, I think.
Mm-hmm.
The other kid, like Jack is always so damn serious. Like, you can't laugh when Jack's on the screen because he's just so serious all the time.
But this is the part of the show where you get that it's not comic relief, but you get a like a sigh of relief, like something went right, like
A little
we
break.
got it. Yeah, we know all
Some
three of them are
tension.
alive now, because we thought they were shot, and now Hurley comes flying in, and it goes the way of the survivors. This is gonna work out for them, because up on the mountain you got Ben, doing his thing, and you're just tense about that whole thing. But at least this scene had a finality that fell the way of the good guys.
You complete me. That was exactly what I was getting at. Finish the thought. Anything else, Pete? You just lost at this point with it.
No, I'm having fun listening to you guys. As a matter of fact,
Well,
no, I don't have anything
The
more
listener
to add,
says the
really.
same thing.
No. Keep going.
All right. Well, now we're going to go to what is my favorite part of this episode, and it's just got everything. And so Charlie,
Says everything.
Charlie is one of the characters that has one of those arcs where, I mean, we could talk about him more after, but he goes through so many changes, and at this point, he's lovable, he's likable, and he's been not that way so many other times. So he's willing to do anything. So he has swam underwater to a station that's called the Looking Glass. And his job is to turn off some jamming equipment that is stopping the outgoing correspondence. And so it's a two-part deal. He's got to shut it off down there in order for them to make that call from up on the mountain, because they won't be able to do it anyway if he doesn't complete his task. But he's also been warned by Desmond, who is a character we'll get to here, that he's going to die. Like, he had visions, and Desmond has these visions. And I'll just say right now, Desmond's my favorite character, and we'll get to him more. Charlie gets down there first, and he is beaten badly by these two women who are running the station. And he stays positive, though, because he doesn't care, because he's there for a reason, and he believes he's going to do it. And he laughs at him, and he's tied up, and he's getting a bit crap beat out of him. Both good guy Desmond and bad guy Mikhail, who's like this Russian guy that wears an eye patch, arrive also in the Looking Glass, and eventually Charlie and Desmond do get the code they need, and everyone else is left for dead. So Mikhail actually shoots one of the two girls after he was given orders to kill Charlie and Desmond, and I don't really understand why he didn't kill them and why he did that. That seemed to be another one of those kind of weird devices there. But he killed them both, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, he shot the one. She fell in like the little lagoon of where you dive in, and then he shot the other one in the back as she was running away. So he did shoot both of the girls.
They shoot him with like a harpoon or something, and it seems like
Desmond
dead.
got him with the harpoon.
Yeah. So Charlie is able to complete his task and turn off this equipment by putting in a code that is to the tune of Good Vibrations, which is a fun little deal. And plus, it's a good detail because Charlie is a musician. So it all comes together in this great writing there. But he sacrifices himself because it turns out Mikhail is not dead, and he has fallen in the water, and he's outside now, and he throws a grenade through the window where Charlie is, causing this whole thing to start flooding. And Charlie shuts the door of the room he's in so that Desmond is okay, knowing that he's going to drown and die. At the same time, he's with the equipment off, he's made quick contact with Desmond's girlfriend or ex-wife or Penny,
beloved, yeah,
who has been searching for him for ages. Mm-hmm. And they think the boat that's offshore that they're going to contact is from Penny, and that she's there to save them.
Yeah.
So Charlie realizes in this little contact with her that boat is not hers. And he sacrifices his own life, and he writes not Penny's. I'm getting teared up. He writes not Penny's boat on his hand, and he holds it up to the window so that Desmond can see to try to go warn the others. As he dies, one of the most poignant, sad deaths in TV history, because you just love Charlie. Everybody loves Charlie,
especially at this point.
The way he dies it's so well done, and it's so meaningful. So now Desmond knows that it's not Penny's boat, but he's nowhere near anybody else to go warn them and do anything about it. And so at this point, the mountaintop people are able to make their contact with that boat, thinking, and the boat's like, yeah, we'll come get you. And everybody's all happy. That's how that ends. And it's just, there's so much in that scene, and it's so great. And if you're going to kill off a character that's beloved, man, they nailed it. And I think Gifford would hopefully agree with that at least.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that the whole point, like you said, when he's sitting there getting the crap kicked out of him by this one woman in particular, he's fine because he's resigned himself to not only the fact that he's going to die, but he's going to die doing the mission, and it's going to get done.
He's dying.
Yeah, that's the thing. Not only is he willing to die, but he knows he's going to succeed somehow.
Right.
I mean, it's probably, in Desmond's vision shows him dying, but it also showed, I think, that he got there and did it. So, like, he believes that
he's good. Well, and we've seen throughout the series where, Desmond has revealed to Charlie that Desmond has these visions. A lot of Desmond's actions are to keep Charlie alive. Like Charlie would have died 10, 12 times by now, but Desmond saw it.
Charlie, you're gonna die, Charlie.
But here's the thing: it was great. I mean, it was wonderful. It's awful that Charlie dies, of course, but you need that in the story. Is a great way to have in the season finale. But the execution was horseshit. And here's the reason why.
Lord, here we go.
So Mikhail, he did his mission. So he could have ran outside the room and sealed the door, and nothing would have flooded where they were at. But he closes himself in the room. Now, when the hand grenade goes off, it blows out the porthole. All Charlie needs to do is swim to the top, wait for the room to fill, and swim out the porthole, and he'd be fine. Like, he could fit through that porthole. You can see him. It's in the background of him as he drowns, and he's.
Why are you ruining this for me?
Because this is why I had a problem. This is why I quit the show. It's like, you have a way out. It's right there. And he dove down and
once
in.
The pressure equalizes, then he would
when
be
the
able
water
to...
stops rushing in, then you can swim out. He swam further
that
to get
seems
into there.
like that seems like it would take longer than.
Thank you. I think the more likely thing
or
is
the porthole.
Why didn't he
might
go out
be
the
too
door and
small.
shut the door?
Was the porthole big enough for you to fit through?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't know if that's for sure. I'd have to see it again. That's a good question, Pete.
It looked pretty
I
big
didn't
glad you're
think
here.
it was, but hey,
I
do have a question while we're on the topic of physics. How does the porthole, or not the porthole, but how does the access thing work? Because inside it looks like you're just coming out of a swimming pool. How would that work from underneath? Because it seems like there'd be no way to do that.
It's air pressure. So, like, if you take a glass and tip it upside down and push it down into the water, it won't fill up because there's air in the glass.
Before Gifford quit college, he was really smart and he knew this shit.
He was, yeah. The alcohol kind of got
to him, like, old divers used to use a diving bell, and it was just a big round with a empty, like, the bottom was open. As long as the air can't rush out, then the air keeps the water from coming in.
So when they are submersing this station, they would just ensure that it's face down, airtight everywhere else, or watertight, and then go straight down, and then it would be a giant pocket of air.
Yep.
This is.
I don't know if that would work.
Everybody, you just learned something. Thank you.
I tell you what, Pete. When we get done here, go fill your kitchen sink with water. Fill like 5-6 inches of water.
I get it.
Take a glass and put it face down, and water won't go into the glass because the air pressure keeps it out.
I'm fascinated. I hope the listener is fascinated as well. My favorite parts of this part, I mean, it's so well done, but it's my two favorite characters. Desmond joined, was it in season 1 or was it in season 2? But they find this hatch, and they gotta figure out a way to get into it. It goes to this underground bunker. And when they finally do get down there, Desmond is down there living alone, and he has to get up every 108 minutes. He can't sleep for more than an hour, not even an hour and a half. Yeah, an hour and a half. Every 108 minutes, and input this code that he thinks is going to save the world. And it's just this crazy story. But like, when you get there, you love it, and because you've been waiting to find out. And I mean, is it Scottish or Irish? Desmond's accent is great. The way he talks to people is great. He's this fascinating character. He's a good-looking guy. He's just a great character. And the way he interacts, because he's not one of them. He's different. He's not one of them.
Right.
And when he's on the screen, he just commands it to me. And I love Charlie. so there is a point where Ben calls the girls, and Charlie overhears and says, "Is that Ben?" And he says, "Tell him Charlie says hi."
Right.
And I love that. He doesn't care. And then he starts singing his song. So his band Drive Shaft was like a one-hit wonder that had the song "You All Everybody," and he's singing that to try to throw him off because that was when Desmond came in, and he's got to throw him off. It's just layer after layer of awesome stuff between these two great characters. So I love it. I love it, and I'm so sad he died, but like you couldn't have done it better and made it more meaningful. And like, okay, we can all live with that because it had to happen.
Yeah, and he went out the way he wanted to go out,
and he was okay with it. Yes.
Yep. Yeah. So
I agree with you, Brad,
a,
that was the most. Oh, sorry. I was just
No,
going to
go
say
ahead.
I agreed with you that was the most entertaining, at least for me, a new viewer. That was the most entertaining storyline. That whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but we're not done yet. One more part. So a hallmark of Lost is the flashbacks in every episode, which we've talked about, but they provide exposition and character development from before the plane crash. In this one, we focus on Jack and see a downtrodden Jack considering suicide, then becoming a hero by saving a child and mother from a car crash when he was about to kill himself. His state gets worse and worse as he is addicted to drugs and painkillers. He can barely stand up. And he's a doctor. He's in the hospital. But, I mean, he is just a mess. He makes a phone call begging to see someone who he meets at the airport. And all this time, it's a flashback. Once he gets there, the person is revealed to be Kate, the other survivor from the island. And we are left with the mind-blowing ending revelation of this episode that this wasn't a flashback. The entire episode, we've been actually seeing a flash forward of people who had survived and gotten off the island. And I mean, whether you like it or not, when it first happened, it's like, holy shit, this is amazing. And so we know they're all going to leave the island at some point, but we also know it's not good news. Jack is a complete mess, and he tells Kate, we have to go back. We never should have left. He agrees with Ben and John now. He's been flying across the Pacific every weekend, hoping the plane would crash again just so he would die. He begs Kate to come back with him. Kate says, I have to get home to him, but we don't know who that is. That's a mystery to come. So this was just such a major turning point episode and such a mind-blowing reveal that they saved until that very end. And it's what made Lost so freaking great. So you're sad, you're shocked, and you're questioning what's going to come in the next season. And like you said, Gifford, now you got to wait all summer to see what's going to happen.
I got a question for you.
Yeah.
In the vein of the movie Seven, who's in the box? Whose funeral did he go to?
Oh, right. Yeah. So there's a funeral that nobody showed up to, but they do not reveal who it is. That's another thing you got to wait for, and you do eventually find out, but you don't get it here.
Yeah, that was because when you're watching it, you think it's a flashback, so it's like, okay, whatever, somebody died,
and maybe that's why Jack's all sad and screwed up.
But then he goes, then when you find out, these were all, flash forwards, it's like, okay, who's in the box? It's got to be somebody that came off the island, somehow, some way. So that's a great little thing too to think about. Like, okay, now we got to find it, because when he talks to the guy at the funeral parlor, he's like, friend or family? He goes, neither. So it's like, okay, is it Locke in the box? Is who? Then you're trying to think like, okay, who are the guys that he kind of clashed with, but whatever on the island. So yeah, it's another great cliffhanger on that portion too. So
you also have good stuff. It probably wasn't the introduction of her, but maybe it was. So Julie Bowen is in here. We all know and love from Happy Gilmore and Modern Family, and she was Jack's ex, and they are not good. They are not together. But I had forgotten that she was on this show too, and so
she was on.
That's right.
Episodes. Yeah,
she was on before this. So
Yep.
In the flashbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And the last part really is Jack saying, we weren't supposed to leave. We have to go back. And if there's one line in the show that I quote, it's, we have to go back. And me and my brother-in-law say that probably more. He loves that line too. Pebble Beach, we have to go back.
Yes. You should not have left Pebble Beach, Brad.
Yeah. So that's the end of this episode, which encompassed so much of the show.
Speaking of the flash, I have a comment to add about the flash forward. As a new viewer, I assumed pretty quickly that was a flash forward as opposed to a flashback. I didn't even know that a flashback was, a thing in all the other episodes. And so I figured it out. so to speak. And the reason I think I assumed that is because he had the long beard. When they first showed him, my immediate thought, and I knew it wasn't, but I thought this guy looks just like Ben Affleck. It took me a minute or two to figure out that it was actually even the same guy, that was Jack that was back on the island, because he looked so different. And I didn't know the characters as well. But the fact that he was on a plane and then he was, on back in his city, I figured that he was coming back from an island or whatever. So,
well, and in Jack's backstory, there's a whole thing with, him having to, I mean, the reason he was in Australia to be on the flight in the first place was because he was flying over to see, to get his dad. And, so he's had, through the flashback, some pretty rough times before he hit the island. So, as a viewer who knows about the flashbacks, it's like you just assume this is just another bad part in his life. And when he says that, like when he's trying to get more oxy and he's like, well, call my dad's office. Well, his dad's dead. You know that already. So right away you think, well, if he's thinking his dad's going to come down or help him get more stuff, then it must have been before, because we know his dad's dead.
All right. So my question going into this episode was, I remembered it being the most fascinating, entertaining 2 hours of TV I'd ever watched, and would it hold up? And for the first part of it, like, and because you're just dropping in the middle of nowhere. And for the first part, I was like, this is good, but like, it's not what I remembered. But by the end, I'm like, holy crap! The twists, the turns, the death, the reveal of all these things. I could go back and remember. Okay, that's why it was great, and it was great. And so I don't know. I just loved it a lot.
Sure.
So a couple of quick things to finish this up. So I want to go back to Charlie again. So Charlie was a drug addict who constantly screwed up, but he had turned things around. The other thing that made his death sad is that, so Claire, one of the other, fetching young ladies on the island like Kate, because you had to have the good looking ones, they had basically become a couple, and she had a baby. She was pregnant when they
crash landed. Yep.
And he really helped her, and they'd become basically a couple, and he was like the father to this baby, and he was going to be that figure. And so that, on top of everything else, just the sacrifice he made, is just, what a character, what a great character he was.
Sure.
I love him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but my favorite character, I said, was Desmond. So Gifford, do you want to chime in there?
Yeah, I would probably go, all in all, I would probably go as Sawyer.
Yeah, well, he's a good choice too.
Because again, we saw it in this episode on the beach. He's willing to take that step. He's a dirtbag. I mean, he, like, when after they crashed, like, he started hoarding all of the supplies and were, selling them to people, and like, just being a total jerk. He's a con man in his former life. But when push comes to shove, he's going to do what needs to be done in order to really keep people alive and, safe. So, Jack, more hims and haws, has more moral qualms
Jack's
about things.
Kind of hard to watch. He's kind of boring. I mean, he needs to be the way he is, but it doesn't make him like, a fun character to like root for and like.
Correct.
And
yep.
As bad as Sawyer can be, like, he's the kind of guy you like and root for at the same time.
Well, and he's got the best nicknames.
Based on this episode or what do you have a character that stands out?
So I did say Jack. It's not earth-shattering, because he is the leader and kind of the main character, like you said. But I thought that he did, demonstrated leadership. I actually had two characters written down, and it's ones we've talked about, Jack and Ben, because Ben was so perfect in what his role was intended to do. Like we said, it's you absolutely despise the guy the second that you look at him. You want to punch him in the face. So I thought he was good in his role in that sense. And Jack did. I mean, he demonstrates the leadership that you need in a situation like that, and is kind of hardened by it. I also do think that his other storylines are pretty interesting too, that when we go back to that flash forward. So yeah, he was the one I was rooting for the most in these episodes.
I already said why I like Desmond. He's so different from all the others. He's like his own thing, and I just think he's so cool. And the fact that he was added kind of after the show started, I think stood out too. If I had to pick an honorable mention, there's one character that's kind of short-lived that I just loved, and that was Mr. Echo. Remember Mr. Echo? Catherine?
Yes. Yep. With his
He
cane, he had a
was
stick or something.
he was like
Yeah.
this fascinating kind of mysterious guy, and
Former
I just
warlord turned priest. Yeah.
really liked Mr. Echo.
Yeah.
One more question before we go on. So this show has all these weird, mysterious elements and things in it. Do you have a favorite element from the part that you watched that, like, when you think of Lost, this is kind of what you think of? I have a couple, but I'll let you go first. Let's
I'll
start
go.
with Pete on this one.
Yep.
Yeah. This is where, when Jenny was watching it, I remember a series of episodes having this weird black smoke or black fog.
Oh, the smoke.
Smoke monster.
And the smoke monster. Okay, thank you. But that's what stood out to me as just being the one to remember. I don't remember specifics or details about it, but that's one that I can recall.
And that one does, at the end of the series, you do get an explanation of what that is. It does come back, but it is very mysterious for most of the 6 years. Like, what is this thing?
Yeah. Oh, so it spans the entire series?
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a symbol of.
I thought it was just like one season thing or something, but
there's so much on this show. It's crazy.
And the first, you didn't know it was the smoke monster at the time, but the first time that you get a feeling of real unease, I don't know if it was the end of the first episode of the series or during the second episode where the pilot of the plane, they find the cockpit and he gets like taken out of the cockpit, like pulled out. Like, you remember? I'm assuming you remember that.
But I guess I don't remember that very
well.
well.
Oh
By
my
the smoke
God.
monster?
Yeah. You hear the
really.
crazy like roar of it just outside the cockpit. The cockpit's like leaned up against a tree, and they find the pilot, and he's still awake, and he kind of fills them in like our transponder wasn't working. Nobody knows where we are, and so they don't know where to look for us.
So he was alive.
He was still alive, and of course the windshield was broken out from the crash, and then you hear this god awful roar outside, and everybody kind of freezes, and the pilot like looks out the window, and then he's just grabbed and pulled out of the cockpit.
I think I do kind
gets
of
pulled out of the cockpit.
And that might have been the very first episode or the second episode of the whole series. So the smoke monster was around through the whole thing. Pete, I would say that would be, the big one for me as I was reading through all these plots of the episodes. Episode 15 of this season, there was a couple sightings of the smoke monster. So I went back and watched that episode just so I could see it. Just so I could, because it was so crazy, so mysterious. But if I can't say smoke monster, because Pete took her there, I would say like just the scope of all of these different outposts on the island. Like you had the hatch, you had
geography.
Yeah, you had a watching post. And you were just there to watch the other people in other areas of the island, and you were supposed to send reports, but the report, you put it in a pneumatic tube, but then they find that these pneumatic tubes are just being shot into the forest and not, just being read. So like, that was like the whole setup is just a big mind fuck, basically. In so many of this, like Desmond pushing the button every 108 minutes. But they had so many different outposts on this island with this Dharma initiative. And I thought that was kind of cool, and just different ways to kind of peel the onion back a little bit more about what is going on the island.
Mine would be the hatch first, because I feel like, before that came up, it's kind of, it's kind of your standard. Obviously there's mysteries, but it's about people stranded on an island, and maybe the others had showed up already, but it's people on an island trying to survive and trying to get off. The hatch just introduces this whole other thing. Like, okay, now we're going somewhere totally different here. And they wanted to get in so bad, and you wanted them to get in so bad to see what was there. And then, that's where we meet Desmond. And you mentioned the inputting. So one of my honorable mentions is the numbers. I love the numbers 4, 8, 15, 16, 23, 42. The numbers I loved all along. Those numbers, you add them up, they add up to 108. And I don't remember getting a really good answer as to what those numbers are, why. Maybe there was, and I've forgotten. But that was kind of a disappointment. I thought the numbers would have a little more meaning, but I don't remember that being
Well,
the
and what were the
case.
numbers again?
4, 8, 15, 16,
Yeah.
23, 42.
So 8 and 15, and their flight numbers 815. You know, like there's all these different, and those are the numbers that Hurley won the lottery with.
Well,
You
yeah,
know,
that
so,
they
I
did
mean,
come back there.
They're always tied back together. And of course, you know, Hurley, after he won the lottery with the numbers, had all this bad luck. And, you know, it's just they tie so many things from the outside world with these people's previous lives somehow back to this island, which is, you know, really kind of interesting as well.
Those are my two big ones. I have two other honorable mentions. One is early in the I think it's the first or second season at least. There's this pirate ship that they found called Black Rock, and it has these Madonna dolls in it, and they're filled with like heroin and just the whole. And then you get the storyline of Mr. Echo and all that, and that was awesome. And then towards the end of the series, which you guys probably wouldn't know this or anything, there's these big statues out on the beach, and one's just like a foot. And the visual of that I always liked, and you wondered like, why is there this giant statue of a foot, and where's the rest of it, and what's going on there? And so I thought that was cool too. So anyway, I felt like the first 3 seasons of this series were like perfect TV. I watched everything after. I didn't quit because I was too engrossed. But I did get the feeling they were making it up, and there were a lot of jokes about that. And it got so confusing that, you know, I was expecting a payoff that I don't really feel like I ever got a payoff. Not that it was bad, I just didn't get, and I didn't expect him to like just wrap it all up into this perfect little bow, but I thought there'd be a little more understanding of what was going on. And like I said, the second watch didn't help me, so I got to get over that. But especially the first 3 seasons, I feel like are about the most perfect 3 seasons of TV that you could put together of this kind of thing, and that's why I picked it, and I loved it. So thank you for revisiting with me.
Well done.
Any other final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, for me, this show, I would equate it to the hot, crazy ex-girlfriend. Okay, so you've got all these characters, Jack, Locke, Kate, they all got daddy issues. So that's going to help, you know, make the hot, crazy ex-girlfriend. Ben is constantly gaslighting you. In the beginning, you were all in right away. Everything was wonderful. Everything was grand. But as you went on, you know, there were more questions than answers available. And when you look back upon your time with the show or with that crazy hot ex-girlfriend, you remember the beginning fondly and wonder why you stuck around as long as you did. So that would be my analogy for this show. Beautiful.
All right. So this was Appointment TV. I mean, this was one of those shows that, especially at the time, I mean, there was still that existed quite often. And it does exist in streaming to some extent too. But we are going to get around the water cooler right now, guys, and we're going to draft our best appointment TV shows that we've watched. These are the shows, so they had to be from our lifetime, because these are the shows that we had to see. Like, it was a network show, it had to see it live on air that night. You didn't want to miss it. You didn't want to miss out on what people would be saying the next day. You didn't want to lose it. But it could be things from recent times too, because there are things that fit that, even though now, you know, there's binge watching stuff and all that as well.
I did add that into the criteria when I did mine. Some of mine are binge worthy.
I do have
most binge worthy because because they come out after streaming is the thing. So, but it kind of they would be the same. They would be the water cooler shows if they're that binge worthy, right?
Right, because if everybody watches them right away and starts talking about it, then you got to catch up, or it's gonna be ruined for you.
Right. So. Well, and like for me, I kind of changed some of the things that I put down because one, there were so many shows when we were growing up. As longtime listeners of the show know, I didn't get a couple big networks when I was growing up, so I had to sit and listen
in college
to you guys talk about all of these shows. And I would try to play along and try to kind of get, you know, an idea of what was happening. And then later in my life, I worked by myself for 16 years, so there wasn't a water cooler. There wasn't anybody to talk to at work for me to discuss these shows. So I kind of had a harder time, like thinking like, oh yeah, I remember being, you know, at the office or, you know, with other people and, you know, discussing this. Or like in college, I watched the show with those people. Like you'd watch a show with your entire dorm
That's the
floor.
appointment television right there.
And that's where I've got some good ones here. So
all right, well, I'm going first because I picked this. You guys didn't decide. You can quick decide who's going to go second. While you silently do that, I'll just throw in my first pick. And I debated on what to pick, but there's really only one choice here for me. I got it. It's boring because I picked it so many times for other things, but I got to pick Seinfeld. I mean, there's just no other choice than Seinfeld. You had to watch it, even in high school. Like Gifford didn't know. We would go to school the next day and talk. By the time the show ended, the whole country is watching the show, and it's the reason why the finale got bad because there was so many people watching it and had so much buildup, it could never achieve it. I mean, the last 2 seasons of Seinfeld weren't that great. There's some great episodes, but they weren't as good to me. But you had to see them every week. Like you couldn't miss it. You had to VCR it. You had to see it and know what was going to happen. So, and they even talked about it on the show when they were trying to sell their show. They talked about the water coolers, talking to the network. I mean, it's great. So, I don't know how I could pick anything else. It's my favorite.
I was in on that from 94 to 98 when it ended.
Yeah, so you did get in on it eventually.
Yep, absolutely.
And you got in on it at the time when the rest of the country hooked up, because earlier it was a smaller audience for a while.
Sure. Yep.
All right, who's next?
Pete.
I am next. My first choice is my first choice because I think it probably was the number one talker of a show. I watched a lot of the episodes. I wasn't addicted to it, but I think Dallas it was the number one talker of any show when you think about the Who Shot JR episode.
That was a big one.
Well, and I didn't write that one down. That was one that my parents watched.
But my parents did too.
I
but
wasn't
that was
really
a
going
huge
to watch that one.
That was a huge nationwide thing. The whole country was on edge during that entire summer, waiting to find out. Like every newspaper, and Time magazine, I think, those kinds of things. It was a big deal.
The season where it was all a dream and Bobby comes out of the shower.
Yep.
I mean, that was a huge deal.
I only pick shows that I watch, but I can't argue. I mean, that's a great pick. So if you're going to go that direction, that's a great pick.
Yep. All right. So I am going to pick one, and this was more of a talker, like I say, that I actually wasn't watching at the time, but I would hear you fuckers talk about it every Monday morning, and that would be SNL.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I got into it in college, and there were some really good seasons with Farrell and
So it's had its ebbs and flows, and it's had the cast you like or cast less, but depending on the politics at the time. I mean, like for example, when Sarah Palin was and Tina Fey came on, you didn't miss that. You had to see it, and so that's high on my list. It maybe not every week of my life because it's been on my whole life, but it definitely. There's times where you can't miss it.
Right. And if there was a big skit, like everybody's talking about it, even like Nate Bargatze with the George Washington thing. I mean, everybody went nuts.
And then you want to know, what did I miss? And now you can go on social media or YouTube and see it, but you still.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Back to me. Well, I guess I'll go with Lost. It's my number 2. And I just made a case for it for an hour. So I'm picking Lost.
And a great case.
Enough said, so I don't need to say any more.
All right. My next one is, in my opinion, the most binge-worthy show that I've ever watched. I had to watch it start to finish, and I couldn't wait, to get to the next episode, and I really wanted to talk to people about it. It was Breaking Bad.
Yep. That's one I watched after the whole series was done.
Mm-hmm. But it's a top 5 all-time TV show.
Right.
In my opinion. I mean, it's
such a great quality show. The acting, the writing is brilliant. The storyline is brilliant. It keeps you hooked. At the end of every episode, there's something that makes you want to watch the next episode.
But even though I watched it like 5 years after the fact, once I started going, and I knew like my wife had watched it, my friends like Dave and Hummel and whoever had watched, like I wanted to watch the episode so that I could go back to them and say, hey, you remember that one? So I mean, it still works even though I was behind, because I didn't know, it wasn't ruined for me because I didn't know about it.
So, and I was kind of the same way. It's a tough one to binge though because it's so heavy. Like it's. But that's I watched it too. I watched it after the fact. All right. Well, I think I'm gonna go with the show we covered, the second episode that I was on, and I'm gonna go with the Friends.
I was going to take
Oh,
that.
dang.
So
That
that's
was
my
going to
number
be
3.
my next one.
And that's a great choice because we did. Everybody talked about it, and we were the A. I mean, it was like,
Yeah, because like
and again,
we didn't watch it together, but like we would talk about it when we
well, and when it first came out in college, I remember
Mhm.
like people were watching their dorm rooms, and like,
Mhm.
I mean, that's yep, that was my next pick. So instead, I will go with one that came out around the same time as Lost, and really the first season or two just took the country. Well, not the country, maybe, but it did take people by storm. The Office. I remember when The Office came out, especially within my family, my brother and my sister and friends too. It would be like, "Did you see The Office last night? Did you see what happened on The Office?" And it was great. And that's a show that kind of petered out, and the last season or two probably shouldn't have happened.
Once
But
you lost Michael.
that first part though was like the definition
Mhm.
of must see TV.
Yep.
All right, I got another good one that was a nationwide talker because of the characters, mainly the main couple. That one of the main characters left and then was replaced. I'm talking about Sam and Diane, and then Kirstie Alley came on Cheers.
Mhm.
That was always a big nationwide talker. What was going to happen? Are they going to get together, or is he going to get together with Rebecca, or what?
Will she? Won't they? Yeah. Will they? Won't
Will
they?
they?
And not only that, but like when Woody came in and when Rebecca came in, like, will the show survive? Like, are these cast changes going to, because
Yeah,
people love,
yeah.
these characters, and
Mhm.
it kept going through all these changes, and it got even bigger.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, GIF.
I'm gonna go into the streaming realm. I think this show hit the nation, and everybody talked about it, even though you binged it.
You're gonna take again.
What's that?
You're gonna take mine again. Maybe not. Maybe not.
I'm going Stranger Things.
Ooh, no, you're not. I have that on my list, but not quite that high.
Because man, everybody was on top of that one. I mean, it was so massive, and then like people would drop Netflix and then get it back in time for the second season. Like
Yeah,
everybody
and
was so
that's where
excited.
if you got kids that watched it, like me and you, maybe you did too, like they would watch it so fast, and then they'd be wanting me to, and I have to like, oh, I gotta catch up quick. And like this last season, they'd take videos of them crying at the end because of how sad they were. I'm like, okay, I gotta see what happens. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's a binge one because they put them all out at once.
Right.
But still, you
Mhm.
had to catch up quickly, or you were gonna get it ruined.
Right. Yeah. You had to watch it quick, otherwise, yeah, your people at work or yeah.
All right. Well, I'm going to do the same thing. Now, this is a show that I first binged because it kind of was a slow burn for a lot of people, but then it is a weekly show on Apple, and that's Ted Lasso. And we did an episode on Ted Lasso,
Mm-hmm.
and everybody I know that loves that show, and especially when you got to the third season, like, and you knew it was supposed to end, and everybody's talking about Ted Lasso, and do you like what's happening, and what's going on here, and total talker.
Yeah.
So much did an episode on it.
All right, I'm going to have to put what is, I think, easily the most quoted TV show that, at least in our lives, and certainly you would repeat and talk about every episode it's still on. I'm going with The Simpsons.
Yeah.
No, they just aired their series finale the other night. Did you hear that?
What?
Are you serious?
Well, I
Oh.
read this. I'm like, wait a minute. No, they did. They did like a series finale, but I don't get. It wasn't it's not like they did some takeoff of a finale
Okay.
and like didn't advertise it. But the show is not done. It's going to keep going.
Oh,
So
okay.
I didn't see it. I don't really understand totally. But my first thought was, wait a minute. Did they really just shut it off now? And they didn't. But it was.
They're not going to shut it off
like, this week.
They're not going to shut it off in mid-season. I mean, that's.
I figured there'd be a little more knowledge about
Not
that.
even mid-season.
Like all of a sudden, Simpsons got canceled. Like, yeah, right.
After 75 years. Yeah.
All right,
Yep.
I am going to stay in the animated realm, and this show does such a great job of social commentary and staying on top of things, how quickly they can turn it out. And I'm going with South Park.
Oh yeah, I didn't put
Another
that on
good
my
one.
list, but that was definitely for the first few years for me too.
Well, even recently, like I remember there was one that came out with
Yeah, there's been.
Markle and Prince Harry or whatever, and that was such a big episode. Them, you know, basically moved to South Park and can't understand why nobody will leave them alone, even though all they do is seek attention from everybody. So yeah, that one wasn't that many years ago, but when that first came out, like it was for sure a talker. Like you made sure to watch that one every week.
I totally missed that one on my radar. That's a great choice. And yeah, especially like the first 6 episodes before even like it really started, and then the first season, just like every week. I'm gonna go. So now we've hit on pretty much all the big ones I have. The rest kind of run together. I'm gonna go. Oh boy, I don't know what to pick. I'm gonna pick a show that I had to watch with my kids and me got into this show a few years ago, and it's still on, and it was on before, but there was a stretch there. And if you're into the show, that you've got to watch it every week because otherwise you're gonna get it ruined, or you're gonna miss out. And that's America's Got Talent.
Oh.
So I don't watch it anymore, but I still see clips and like, oh my god, did you see what happened? And then I'll watch those clips and think, man, maybe I should watch that. But it was a show that my kids and I got into about 8 years ago, and for like 4 years, like I mean, it was appointment TV. We had to sit down and watch it. And the things would go on, and like if you missed an episode and missed what they did, you would be missing out. So without a clear choice, I'm gonna pick that as my last pick.
Okay.
Well, I'm very happy to be getting this at number 5, and I'm surprised that you overlooked this one, Brad. It might be on your list somewhere. I don't know, but very binge-worthy, lovable show. I'm going Schitt's Creek.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. I guess because it's kind of like Breaking Bad, where watch the whole thing after it was over, but.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah, but it is
definitely
Schitt's Creek is one that people do talk about and still talk about. And it, especially in its last season, it won like every Emmy. Although it hadn't won any Emmys before that. That's kind of why they won everything at the end, I think.
Yeah, I'd say especially because actually the first time around that we watched it, we did binge it, but the last season hadn't come out yet, so we did watch that last season live. Then.
Yeah. All right. So my last pick is one of the biggest shows that came out in the last 10 years. There were podcasts about it, talking about it directly after. Everybody was in on this show, and I did not watch it at the time, just as kind of a badge of honor, just to thumb my nose at it. But it's a show that I loved, I caught up on, and love to this day. Think it's one of the top 5 all time on TV, and that is Game of Thrones.
I was writing it down before you said it. I knew what you were doing for it. And we have an episode on that too.
We do.
Yep. And Schitt's Creek, and Ted Lasso, and The Office, and Lost, and Seinfeld, and Breaking Bad, and The Simpsons, and Friends, and
Stranger Things.
And Stranger Things. I mean, almost everything we said, which is why we picked them, because they're great shows to talk about.
Yep. Cheers, Ted. Yeah. Yep.
All right, I got so the other like kind of game show in quotes that I could have picked, any dating show, but like Temptation Island, which we have an episode on.
Yep.
I mean, because it wasn't just me and my wife, like Dave watched it, some of our other friends watched it, but some people, Joe Millionaire was one. Love Island right now is one that like comes out on Netflix and people got to watch. I watched with my wife. What did we watch on Netflix? I forget the name of it now. It was the one where all the singles showed up on the island, but then they weren't too hot to handle. That was a big one. So you could lump those all in. For a large segment of the population, those are appointment TV too.
Yes, they are.
I could have picked Parks and Rec and How I Met Your Mother. Those are maybe a little more personal to me. Maybe not quite as widespread, but they should be. Modern Family for the first couple of years would have been kind of like The Office.
We're watching that right now, as a matter of fact, as a family. We love it.
I almost picked as an alternate choice here. I mean, because people would plan their schedules in college around it. Days of Our Lives. I mean,
I
for
thought
a lot of
one of you two would pick that.
I almost picked it. It's actually right after Temptation Island and America's Got Talent on my list here.
I think the reason you didn't pick it, Brad, is because you have a vengeance after being murdered by one of their cast members.
Yes.
A couple more. The Wonder Years we have an episode on that. That was like our middle school water cooler show.
Yep.
We actually talked about it then. Only Murders in the Building and Cobra Kai are two other streaming ones that I have a lot of people I want to talk about with, and they're pretty big shows. And the last one we've also talked a lot about on this show, Northern Exposure, and a lot of us did talk about.
Yeah.
And that was one of those kind of cult water cooler shows at the time.
Sure.
So that's it. Who else you got? We'll wrap it up.
All
Pete?
right. I have, I know a lot of people talked about it. I didn't get into it, which is why I didn't pick it, but X-Files was always a big talker.
I didn't either.
Family Ties was one that a lot of people were talking about. What's going on with Alex and his girlfriends, right? I remember when he broke up with Ellen, that was a huge deal.
I remember that too.
Twin Peaks was certainly a nationwide ripping talker. ER.
One of the cult ones.
Yep. ER, The Sopranos, Married with Children, and Will and Grace.
Yeah, The Sopranos was kind of the last really big one that I didn't get to pick on here. The other one I had was West Wing. That was more for me, but even there, like I was watching that with my roommates, but it was absolute appointment television for me every week. But like it wasn't water cooler for me. It was, we'd watch it together as roommates and then discuss what was going on. So yeah, that was about it for mine.
All right. Hey, Gifford.
Yeah.
You know what band gets pulled out of the cockpit?
Well, kicking and screaming, but yeah, it's Preacher Row.
Right after they had their dicks measured?
Right after, yes.
That's what.
Yeah. They're lucky they can fit in the cockpit, honestly.
Use that line. I'm like, all right, I'm writing that down for Preacher Row. The guy gets pulled out of the cockpit. I'm like, all right, there it is. This is a difficult one. I didn't know what I was going to do. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Next week, we're going to do what?
We are doing.
We are doing Talladega Nights, and we'll reveal if I got the job or not.
Ooh, yay.
Yeah. Maybe depending on whether Pete's on the show or not.
I'll be on.
All right, good.
Either way.
All right, stay tuned. Talladega Nights. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
No one's here to comfort me. Sorry for what I have done. Sorry that your son is gone. 7 steps and it will be my last. Next time, tell me on my plan. I turn and I look to you. I'm scared, but there's nothing I can do.